Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Caster from Ponder PD in Texas. He has 36 years, 35, 36. We were kind of trying to do the math offline in law enforcement. So, a long time, a lot of experience. Really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show, Chief Caster. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks. Thanks. How you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for being here. So, I want to kind of dive into your background a little bit. Obviously, you've been in this career a really long time, and you have some really interesting personal things too that I want to dive into. So, can you give us a little bit of background? You started this career in 1989. What does it look like so far for you?
So at 1989, I was 21 years old, and I was a year off from knee surgery because I was a athlete. I fought in open party tournaments and kickboxing and boxing, and I'd had a knee surgery that kept me out for a year. And of course, that's something that I would wanted to continue to do, and I had struggled. I knew I wanted to get into law enforcement since I was a kid. But I didn't want to give up being a fighter. And I had a colleague of mine or a friend of mine in the fight world that just became a police officer. He was 2 years older than me, and we've been in this together since I was 12. And he said, if you he went to work for Dalworthy and Gardens PD, which is a suburb of Arlington, Texas. And he says, if you work for smaller towns, you can still contract for fights and still compete and be able to train and because it's not as taxing as at a big agency. Well, so I started in 1989, and I worked the small towns the first 10 years of my career. I worked at three small towns. I worked at Hickory Creek, Highland Village, and then Justin. And they were all smaller agencies. And then he went to work at Carrollton, which is a suburb of Dallas, bigger city. And he told me, "Hey, I was wrong. It's so much easier in a big agency. It's easier to train. You don't have to." So anyway, I ended up going to work at the Denton County Sheriff's Office, which is the county seat of the towns that I worked in. And I also grew up in Denton County. So working at the Denton County Sheriff's Office, it's a bigger agency, a lot of people on each shift. So it was a lot easier to get on a night shift or evening shift to train when you get under contract for the fights and to train all the time in the gym. It's easier to stay in shape and do what I need to do. So during that time, I continued to both careers, being a full-time fighter and also during that time training fighters and teaching Taekwondo and also in boxing and having a full-time law enforcement career. And you think they didn't really affect each other. I mean, I was able to be all in on law enforcement. I was able to do all of my shift work and participate on the SWAT teams when I was younger and other things. And during that time, I've work in the bigger agency. I would say I've got a lot of things I got to do at the smaller agency because you're pretty much wear many hats from investigative, crime scene, whatever that you wouldn't normally be able to do, file cases. So when I went to the bigger agency, it helped. But at the bigger agency, there's a lot more that you can do. And of course, your call load is so much more. You're going to a lot more calls on a shift, a lot more critical incidents on the shift. So you learn so much more in a smaller amount of time, and you get to experience just about everything in operations that you could possibly do, and give you more of a career mindset of what you wanted to do moving forward in law enforcement. Other than a couple of undercover shifts and some investigative shifts, I did some highway drug interdiction for a little while. Most of the career, I by choice stayed in patrol
Mm.
because that's where all the action is. Any special investigator, homicide investigator, crime scene, whatever you decide to do, you only do that after a patrol officer arrives on the scene, secures the scene, makes it safe for you. So everything that you would do in a specialized field, you see all of it in patrol. And it felt like that was the front line of it. And I seemed like I had more impact on people, on training and mentoring people as I got older than I would in the other divisions. So I stayed mostly in patrol and um, also having being an athlete, uh, also training to be a gym rat the whole time. You pretty much have to, and then you train even more when you're training for a fight or get under contract for a fight. It helped me so much better in my career because of all the stress that you go through. It seems like when you're in a gym all the time, when you're lifting weights, you're doing your running, your sparring, your all this training. There's the best way I can say it is you're fighting a battle with yourself. You're literally at war with yourself. Every time you're at the gym, every time you're in a mirror throwing, 200 jabs, 300 kicks, whatever, you're killing yourself to try to get that, what you see as that perfect technique. And that fighting your war with yourself, it gives you sort of a mindset of controlling things. And of course, you burn off a lot of, you don't realize how much stress you burn off when you work out and when you're healthy. And like anything, when you're healthy, anything from your immune system, and that's the other thing I kind of left out, uh, physical health, you come across every disease you can think of that most people would never be exposed to. If you're working, the worst place you could work at is either in an emergency room or a jail. And the next of that would be on patrol because you're exposed to everything. And if you're in shape and you have a strong immune system, if you have a strong immune system, you're not getting sick all the time.
Mm.
And then have to deal with the stress of everything you see on a call. A lot of people don't understand law enforcement. What would be a normal person's, I mean, what would be a catastrophic, tragic event that would change someone's life forever? That's your Monday, two times on Tuesday, a bunch of times on a busy week. And um, a lot of people have trouble wrapping their brain around that or fathoming that, but that's very taxing on your mental health and very taxing on how you do things. And to me, when I was in shape and training all the time, it was so much easier to navigate that and it didn't affect me. Your body doesn't produce cortisol. You're burning all that off in the gym, and you're not taking it as hard because you're in shape. Being in great shape seems to negate a lot of things.
Yeah. I'm curious because, you obviously come from a background of professional athleticism. Do you think that law enforcement professionals are also athletes?
Uh, yes and no. If you look at it, I hate that this from the dynamic of, let's say, military. And my son just got out of the Marine Corps. They get up every morning and they train. They get their unit, they do their PT together, do everything together. They stay in shape all the time. They're held accountable for doing that. It's because they've got to be ready at any time to deploy.
Hmm.
And then if they have the assignment coming up or deployment coming up, they train even harder physically, and then they train specifically for the mission that they're going on. In law enforcement, we really don't because the nature of our job. There's some guys, unless they self-initiate to train to be a professional athlete or to be in shape, um, they're not because they go to work, they're in their car and they go from sitting down driving a lot, going from call to call to call to call, to getting out of their car and immediately get an adrenaline dump. And their adrenaline's constantly going up and down. You get a hot call, your adrenaline goes up, you're having to run code 3 all the way across the county or the city to get to this call. And then you get there, it's high stress, people are screaming and yelling, there's conflict, 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 and you've got to swallow that, slow your breathing down, try to use your de-escalating skills to be calm when you're really up here. And your adrenaline's going up and down, and you get this condition called heightened awareness. And if you look at a scale where you've got the very bottom and the very height of heightened awareness, and most people are in the middle, they bounce around in the middle. Where in law enforcement, you're going way above the boundary for most of your shift. And at the end of your shift, because it's like when you get high on a stimulant, when your body crashes from it, you go way below the lower level. And that's what happens to officers when it's a physiological thing called heightened awareness, where they're way up here. Then when they get home, they crash way below the normal level, and they are just tired and wore out mentally, physically. Some guys just, they sit on the couch because they've just got I mean, they're spent. It takes a while to recover from that. When you're in shape, you can mitigate that a lot better. And there's a lot of officers, and then because of their shift, also it's evolved so much over the years, but shift work in law enforcement, it seems like the more they can abuse you to go without sleep, the better they think they're managing. And so you're working a night shift, and then you got to go to this school during this week. You go from working night shift to having to go to two classes during the day and still work night shift, or go to court and be up half the day and still go to night shift. And you can't take off because they're shorthanded, and it goes on and on and on. And it's like the job is designed to give you sleep problems. And so from the job of your heightened awareness going up and down, and then your sleep problems, a lot of people, unless they are just a gym rat or they have an activity that holds them accountable, to training, then they're not athletes at all. And that they're out of shape.
Mm.
And then some of them, just because of the stress of the job, when you get really stressed out and you can't manage it well, your body produces a stress hormone called cortisol. And cortisol in your body does a lot of damage to your body. The main thing is it causes your body to store calories and store insulin and get fat. Um, Someone that's being put in a concentration camp, their body would produce cortisol so that they could, it's the body's way of surviving stress or storing calories so that you're not going to starve to death later. I mean, I read lots of books on it, and it's I mean, if you're a male, it keeps your body from producing, it kills your testosterone production, where all your energy, your brain function, mood, um, and your ability to build muscle, uh, speed up your metabolism, metabolic rate, so you can stay healthy and not get fat. And um, and from that, I would say probably, even though they should, and when they first get in line, I mean, man, I would say 65% are not, but I think I'm being way too conservative there. I think the number is broader, are not athletes because of what the career does to them, especially when they're in patrol or they're doing shift work. They're a dispatch patroller working in detention. The shift work just kills that, along with the stress of the job, if that makes sense.
I'm tracking where you're going, and I think that it gets into this conversation because when I look at the functions of the career, what the career is asking of you, it does require an elite level of athleticism, physically and
Mhm.
mentally, right? You have a hard
Sure.
career, and you have to be able to run. You have to be able to do defensive tactics. You have to be able to think on your feet, effective decision making. These things, are requirements and expectations of your career. I think what you're saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are people who let themselves, throughout the career with the challenges and the stress and the trauma and the shift work kind of fall below the expectations or the requirements of the career from a physical and mental perspective. And it's hard. It's hard to keep those things up over time, especially with the things that are going on within your body. And so I think
Mhm.
my question for you is, how can academies and how can departments maintain a level of physical and mental health throughout the career? Whether that's some sort of standard or training, or, how can we keep everybody fit over time throughout the duration of their career without, having that kind of drop off period?
Well, there's certain things you can do. In the last decade or so, some agencies have perpetual fitness test that you have to continually pass. But then a lot of people only start training just before that so they can pass the physical agility test to do that. And the biggest thing, and it'll sound controversial, but it is what it is. The administration at a lot of agencies don't care. They don't care. They need manpower on the street. They need boots to answer calls. And if you were in court all day, and they need manpower, well, guess what? You got to show up for shift and work a shift. If somebody, if you're a low level seniority and someone's off on FMLA leave, someone's off on this, someone's off on that, shorthanded from a captain and lieutenant's position down, where they're in charge of manpower, boots on the ground, they got to report to their upper chain of command that they're adequately staffed to answer the calls and have an applicable response time. What that costs, they don't care. They don't care. And I think it's I don't know of a nicer way to say it. There needs to be more accountability going downhill to the people that are in charge of the manpower, that are making sure that they have adequate time off. Um, and like the 12-hour shifts, when we first started going to the 12-hour shifts, so that was sort of a new thing in law enforcement. It didn't have it where you had every other weekend off. You had a 4-day weekend or a 3-day weekend. It wasn't user friendly. It was to figure out a way to give you more manpower. Now we can't. They haven't. trained us in law enforcement, you have to paramecium 101, where you split in half like an amoeba to be two places at once. But if they could figure out a way, they would. Well, the closest to that was a 12-hour shift. Figure out to get more manpower. We don't have manpower by making us work longer. Um, and as it's morphed now, they've changed it to where it's more officer friendly, to where you have a 4-day weekend, every other weekend off, and it's not as taxing of it. It's more, you have more time off to have do family things and to train and all this other stuff. So it's just now getting evolving to in this decade and the last maybe 12 to 14 years, to where it's becoming more officer friendly for the officers. Some places that are civil service, and Texas is a right to work state. So
Mm.
if you don't have civil service, I mean, they can let you go at any time for any reason, and they remind you of that daily if you can't show up for work or you can't show up for shift, or you know. And so it is. I mean, I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy here, but this is something I've seen throughout my career in small agencies and in big agencies, and even the agency I worked at. Um, and that right there is, in that, what they don't realize they're doing is they're overworking their people, and they could care less if they have time for their family or whatever. They want boots on the ground. They want officers available to answer the calls, um, and a lot of them don't think about the when they think about answering calls, number of boots on the ground, response times, numbers and stats. They look at it from a theoretical standpoint of making numbers work. And in that perspective, they completely lose the working application aspect of that.
Mm.
Well, yeah, that you're going to have guys working with on no days off over a long period of time and no sleep and having to go to school and court and all this. They don't care. They want, to them, all they see is numbers. They see the theoretical aspect of it, of making numbers work on their end, and they lose the aspect of the working application, or what it actually takes to make that happen. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that causes where the job it sucks it out of you. I can't think of another more appropriate verbiage. It just sucks it out of you. And when I say it sucks the life out of you, the job itself and the shift work does that. And only the very disciplined people in this line of work stay physically fit. So just having a test annually that you have to pass, well, you're just going to have guys that'll start training 2 or 3 weeks before, running their wind sprints or whatever, 2 or 3 weeks to make sure they can pass the physical agility test, but they're not going to do it year round. Um, Adding benefits and training days. I mean, there's other ways that you can do that, that other, that allow your guys to train. You could have training days for your guys where they're doing physical on this day here, they're, getting paid to train. In the military, you're getting paid to train. Let's look at the UFC. The UFC, for the first time, professional martial artists are actually getting paid a real purse for a fight, whereas before you didn't get paid hardly crap compared to boxing. But they get paid a salary to train also. They get their supplements paid for, they get paid to train. So anytime they get called up to a fight, they're already in shape, they're getting paid to train. Military, why are those guys training? They're getting paid to train. And part of their job is they get up at 6 a.m. every morning or 5 a.m. or whenever, and they do their everyday training. And then when they go to do a mission, they do their everyday training. The only officers that seem to have accountable training when they train together as a group is if you're on the SWAT team or you're on the SORT team if you're in detention. Uh, we got to figure out a way to have that in regular patrol, and um, to get them to stay, in shape or train together. Uh, to get that, because the accountability has been kind of upside down and backwards, and that's why it hasn't worked. Does it make sense?
Yeah, there's two things that you said that I kind of wanted to point out is one, understanding that these are people,
Yes.
right? Like, and of course, we can go down that path where we've already all seen it on LinkedIn and all over the internet where they're training robot law enforcement officers to do certain things, right? Like, we see this.
Mm-hmm.
But until the day comes, which I don't think it ever will, I don't think it'll fully replace, but until the day comes where we're dealing with robots, we're dealing with humans, how
Mm-hmm.
can we support humans and understand that they do have needs and they do have lives outside of the career, and how can we support longevity through different initiatives? I think
Sure.
the other thing that you said was discipline. You said those who have discipline, and we talked about this a little bit offline about mindset, and having a mindset for these things. And I think that it's twofold. I think it's a partnership, and if you are working for an organization that is not supportive of wellness and is putting in place initiatives that are burning you out and you don't have time off, and you still have a responsibility to yourself to have discipline and to take initiative. You can't
Mhm.
always wait for somebody else to do something for you. And at the same time, the agency should be doing these things, right? Like, and we're in agreement with that. Like, the agency should be taking care of their people, but people should also be taking care of themselves. And so I like to kind of point that out because I'm guilty of this too, of like, being like, well, I'm not going to do it until this person does it for me. If they're not doing it, I'm not going to do it. And I think that we have to also be able to take care of ourselves, even if other people aren't willing to take care of us as well.
And then
Um,
back to something you said about the robots,
yeah.
back to being robot versus human. When you had a 70-hour work week, your choice is 4 hours sleep a night or 6 hours of sleep before you get back into a 16-hour or whatever you're working with no days off. So in a 70-hour work week, you've got to choose between seeing your family and
Mhm.
getting some sort of healthy sleep, which is not, and then I'm trying to figure out a way to get a workout in there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So unless you're somehow a cyborg, not human, and you're not having to, you don't have the restraints of having to have sleep and nutrition and that sort of thing, then you're golden. You just get plugged back in and charged up for 2 hours and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
What you said, absolutely. But that, when I say that the career sucks it out of you, like when you've had a week where you've had to work over on your shifts, you had any days off, you had court 2 days that week to where you're lucky that you had 5 hours of maybe 4 hours of really good sleep before you went to work into the other shifts. And this happens because you don't get days off that week because they're shorthanded by the way. And so you've had no days off, and this has lasted for 14 days, two
Yeah.
weeks. So in that time, unless you can, the people that try to train, the people that try to work out even a little bit, forget about it. I mean, you can't even, you're lucky, even your nutrition goes to crap because luckily you can't eat. I mean, you're stuffing something in your mouth between calls or here and there just to keep your stomach from growling, and you're living on energy drinks and coffee kind of thing.
For sure.
So that, when I say that sucks it out of you, it's not, when you have a schedule that sucks that out of you, it is almost a physical and mentally impossibility to train.
Yeah.
And I've had times where, if I'm not training in the gym, it would drive me crazy, and I'd go a whole week without training, and then when I get back into my routine, I mean, of course, you feel like you've lost so much, especially your wind and everything else, and anything that's cardio related or anaerobic related. Um, and I've had times where I've had a 2 week hiatus where I just couldn't train at all because there was a 70-hour work week back to back, and then you've got, so yes, and then some of it is I guess would say self-inflicted, because while they're doing that also, they're financially burdened. And so they're working all these extra off-duty jobs to make ends meet financially. Because for the longest time, law enforcement didn't pay diddly. You know what I mean? They're like school teachers and law enforcement, they get paid anything. And they're raising a kid and they've got to pay for this, they got to pay for that, they got to pay for all the school stuff and all that. So on top of all that, they've got to figure out a way here and there to work these extra off-duty jobs to make ends meet financially. So that's what I would call that self-inflicted, but a lot of it's, if you're a parent, you understand that, you've got to do whatever it takes to make sure your kid has everything they need.
Right.
But beyond that, the key word you said, it just sort of lit a light bulb off my head. They're not robots, they're human. And that's the thing, like you said, that I think a lot of people forget about it. On the public side, they don't understand that we're human and humans make mistakes. And when you're in that kind of mindset of no sleep and all this and overstressed, your critical decision making skills takes a nosedive. Your problem solving skills and critical decision making skills just tank because you're mentally fatigued. Um, so yes, I agree with that. But the whole key thing you said, robots, that needs to be on the administrative end as well, and especially on schedule. Scheduling is everything. Manpower and scheduling.
Yeah.
Does
Well,
that
and I
make
think,
sense?
well, and I think it kind of segues into something that we talked about offline is this conversation of burnout, and we're
Mhm.
seeing people leaving the career because of that, right? And so you had shared some, statistics with me about burnout and, how
Sure.
long people are staying in this career and, people leaving entirely because of that. And so can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing as far as time frame right now of people who are entering into this career? When are they leaving? How long are they staying? And what does that burnout look like? And I know you've experienced this in your career as well.
Sure.
And the second part of this question is, what is the solution? I'm a really big fan of having conversations and then trying to identify like what's the solve, what's the fix, how do we move forward from that? And so maybe give me a little bit of, your experience and what you're seeing on the topic of burnout, and then what do you think is the solve?
Sure. Well, to prompt that, to have a baseline of understanding, you got to understand the real statistics. The real statistics are that 75% of everyone in law enforcement is completely out of law enforcement in 5 years at 30 years of age.
Well,
In my career, there's a couple of times where that statistic has changed because there would be a decade in there where people started, for whatever reason, started law enforcement in their late 20s versus their early 20s. The ones that started in their late 20s, uh, the statistic was similar. Instead of being 5 years at 30 years of age, it was 7 years at 35 years of age. But because it seemed like every 2 decades it would flop back to people starting at later time in their life, in their late 20s or early 20s. But basically, overall, in the graph, it stays the same. 5 years at 30 years of age is when most people get out of law enforcement. It's because it's so mentally and emotionally taxing on someone. Some people, they like the idea of being a cop, and but when they're actually doing the job and actually getting fire hosed with all the trauma, drama, tragedy, adrenaline dumps, stress, their body, it just can't take it. They can't take it. It's not that they're lesser than persons. God made us all different. There were some people like like the Benjamin tribes of Israel. Those guys were warriors. Their job was to be warriors in battles, and there were some of them that were better at numbers, and some of them that were better at this, that, and the other. But anyway, the some humans are better at some humans can be fighters, can be professional fighters, and some humans cannot. Some people can go beyond their limitations and train that. Some people can be skydivers. Some people can be pilots. Some people say, no, no, I'm afraid of heights. Some people are very good at math and can do numbers like crazy. We're all different. We all have different talents, and we also have different things that we can withstand and we don't. Some people have a high pain tolerance. Some people do not.
mm,
Um, so knowing that human aspect, it goes back to the thing you said, robot versus humans. Well, if we were all work robots and we were all cookie cuttered and made the same, then the solution would be easy. One solution would work broadly for everybody. But just as our fingerprints are all different, we are all different. That's how God made us.
mm,
Um, and so in law enforcement, they used to always say that the job calls you. You don't choose the job chooses you. And I could say there's nothing more truthful in the career than that. If the job did not call you, that you can't picture yourself doing anything in life ever, because it's almost like a mental illness, that sucks you into this job and you can't walk away from it. That's where you feel the job called you. You can never see yourself doing anything else. If you just choose, I think it'd be kind of interesting if I would be a police officer. I saw a couple cool shows on TV, and yeah, my favorite show when I was a kid was this. And then they get into it, and a lot of them want to stay as first responders, and they transfer over to being a fireman or being a paramedic, and some of them are be a trauma nurse, but they can't. That about 5 years, it's complete burnout. I mean, I've seen fighters like that I trained. They were amazingly talented, tough, great fighters, but they were like a shooting star. They were really awesome and talented for 4 years, and then their body just gave out. They just physically couldn't do it anymore. We see in the NFL, you'll see a first round draft pick who's a great superstar, and he's great for about a year or 2 years, and his body just breaks down and he can't endure it anymore. That's because we're all different. Some people stay great over a 10-year career. Law enforcement's no different because of the physical, not so much the physical, the mental and emotional restraints, which breaks down the physical. So that statistic is your biggest wall that you're hitting to try to create longevity in law enforcement is that 75% of the general public can't do it. You know, I go back to statistics I heard from Lieutenant Colonel Dr. David Grossman when he talks about that when he uses the analogy of the sheepdog, and the wolf, where he says that 98% of the general public have no high propensity for violence. They're basically like sheep. They'll butt each other, they'll hurt each other, but they don't have that high potential for violence. 2% of the population have an incredibly high propensity for violence. 1% of them are the wolves. Those are people that prey on the sheep and
Mm.
torment them and victimize them. The other 1% are sheep dogs. They're the ones that hunt the wolf to protect their beloved sheep. So law enforcement, I look at it as saying if that sheepdog gene that you have, there's a lot of people, they have the heart to serve others and they want to make a difference in their country and serve others. When they got into law enforcement, they just didn't have that. They didn't have that, maybe that high propensity for violence, or they didn't have that thing in them that allows them to be able to handle a career like that and to physically, mentally, and emotionally handle what the career endures. So they burn out in 5 years. And that would be 75%. The other ones that make it through there, you have a large percentage that you lose what's called the 10-year burnout. And those are people that last a little bit longer, but they don't manage their physical and mental health, and they get that burnout. And the people that make it past the 10-year burnout, most of those people make a career out of it. And another statistic that's tells you how taxing this job is on us. I think it was 68% of people that make a career out of law enforcement never see their 65th birthday. Now, those that do, 72% of those never see 75. So think of a career that you're either die early or ugly, you know what I mean? And they would tell us these statistics when I was going to the academy, and we would, in all the other academies I teach at, they would bring these statistics up, kind of like trying to talk them out of it. The ones that are all in, they don't care. You can tell them that, 10 years from now, your hair's going to fall out, you're going to catch on fire. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Let's go. Because they're all in. So when you go to longevity, you got to understand that statistic of how much it taxes humans. And 75% of them burn out at 5 years and 30 years of age because they're just not cut out for it. Not everybody, the job is not for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there's a large number of those, they still have that heart to serve others. And a lot of those people will rotate into be in firemen or paramedics and or ER staff. So the burnout thing, I've seen from my experience the burnout where you get this officer, he just can't get enough of it. He's got 2 or 3 years in, he's got to pass his 17-week FTO program. He's got it at that 2 to 5 years on the street where he's cut his teeth, where he's learned a lot of stuff. He's getting confidence in what he knows in it. Because the only way you can learn this job really is just to get all up in it, get it all over you, right? So when they really get that base experience where they have their critical decision-making skills, their problem-solving skills, and they can do it quickly because of all the stuff they've seen before, they're all in. They love it. They can't think of themselves to do anything else, but they're so all in that they're on the SWAT team, they're on this team, they're on the negotiator team, they're on this, they're on that. And it's like, dude, when do you go home? It's like they lose their identity in themselves in that job, and that job's everything, and that's a bad thing. Um, I see officers that as I became an older officer and a supervisor, mentoring younger officers, I would tell them, man, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn out. You got about, and then you can see them when they start getting burnt out. Then they'll start working off-duty jobs to make extra money. The very first thing that happens, they start having family problems. They start losing their marriage. They start having problems with their kids. Some of them will start drinking. Things that because they're having trouble coping with all of this because they don't have no at home time or no self time. Everything is the job 100%. It's like they're never at home. Um, and you see them start to decline. They start their attitude, they go from being happy go lucky, excited, very driven, very excitable about everything to being tired, irritable, angry. Anything will make them angry. Um, and you just see the onset of it. You see this perpetual cycle of things they do and how they just start to decline. There's a symptomatic profile that you've seen so many times over and over and over and over again. you know what direction they're heading, and you try to coach them up from that. Man, you need to take a break from all of this and just worry about your job, or you're going to lose your marriage, you're going to lose this, you're going to lose that. And the ones, some get a grip and they okay, you're right. There's, I'm not okay. We need to fix this. And some of them, they look at you like you're crazy, like you're telling them the world is flat or something, what I mean? And they just keep, they're just so locked in. They can't see the peripheral. They can just see what's ahead of them. And those are the ones that burn out. And a lot of those are the 5-year burnout folks.
Yeah.
And then the ones that make it past the 5 years, they hit that hard wall at 10 years and they're done. And usually when they're done, it's not a matter of them stepping away. They usually end up because of legal reasons. They're losing their family, they're losing this, or they get an internal affairs investigation because their anger, they had a big anger outburst on a contact they made on the street and called him a bad name, or they lost their cool and ended up with somebody they were trying to get handcuffed and they went too much force on them, and being reactive to being overly stressed and being no sleep, no stress, no whatever, and making poor decisions. So a lot of them, if they don't just burn out and quit and fizz out, a lot of them hit that hard wall. Usually it's in the form of an administrative investigation for something boneheaded they did that they wouldn't otherwise do had they not let themselves deteriorate to that condition. So that hard 10 years is kind of like very few of them, it's voluntary.
Right.
Most of them, it's they get IA'd out. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And, I've definitely heard stories about this happening. And I know you told me that you experienced some of those same things in your
Mhm.
career with feeling burnt out and, what the career does to your own, personal wellness. And my question is, what is the solution? How do you overcome burnout? How do you create longevity? What are some of those things that people can learn from you, someone who's been through this career a long time, anyone who's listening who maybe is in that position where they're starting to feel a little burnt out and they're starting to feel like, maybe they don't have the longevity that they hoped for in this career. What are some of those things that can help them to overcome that and to have a long and successful trajectory?
Well, I'll say mine was kind of unique because mine came way later in my career. In my right around the I would say right around the 28th, 29th year mark. When I'm Master Peace Officer, been in it forever. I'm the old salty dog. I'm no longer young by any means. I And mine, it seems like the decline or my burnout started when I stopped training. And when I retired from fighting, I had my knees replaced in 2016. And I worked out a little bit after that because it was kind of a pride thing. I wanted to make sure I could do this still, do the splits and kick people in the face, do all the things. I mean, I didn't want to feel like I lost my manhood or to prove I'm still dangerous or whatever. And but I just got so busy, and because I wasn't working out, I let the busy thing take over. Where taking care of manpower, the guys on my shift when I was a supervisor, because I didn't all of our my kid was grown. I was local. My family was local. We had Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners and stuff like that. So I would work a shift for people that wanted to take off. They'd have families that couldn't take off. And in that, I just started getting really stressed. At the same time, we had the Floyd incident and the incident before that. My brain's on a blank. And law enforcement started taking a weird curve where we had the anti-cop thing going on, and that kind of transferred a little bit because it started. It got real deep into the politics area. Of course, it gets good in it works its way into the administrative level of law enforcement. So you get over micromanaging from that. So that there was a big change in law enforcement that, and, you think after George Floyd, a third of officers left the street, never to return again, and that they've never been replaced.
Mm.
And and from that, I mean, there's a lot of precipitating factors in there. I keep using that. That's not all of them. I think I would have handled that better had I had my physical health and been in great shape. But I noticed that I got to where you get overstressed, your body's cortisol. You feel like you get this feeling like the administration behind you is more dangerous to you than the actual threat in front of you, and you just have no, you don't know who to turn your back on, if that makes sense. And you get into that kind of stressed, it just gives you more and more stress. And I got burned out bad. I really did. And a lot of that being my sleep was getting horrible because I wasn't working out. I wasn't training. My nutrition went to crap. And I went from being a walking around, toned up, muscled up, 245, 250 pounds to being a fat old 375 pounds. And I, uh, I was bad. I went from being pre-diabetic to diabetic. And from that, uh, that was kind of when I got that diagnosis. That was from the doctor. That was kind of the big slap in the face, and that was around the time I retired.
Mm.
And had I not retired from the Denton County Sheriff's Office in 2022, I think I would have died of a heart attack in about a year. I think my physical health was declining so fast. I would have been one of those guys that I would have been physically unable to do this job or anything else. Um, so I retired. I was so burned out. It was like never again, ever, ever. I'd rather drive a truck. Uh, the 7 months being off the job, also the thing that was a big game changer is I when I got that diagnosis of being diabetic is I started training. I was like, I'm not going to go from being a world class professional world champion athlete to being a fat guy with diabetes and getting my feet cut off and losing my vision and being one of those guys that I said I'd never be.
Mm.
I had too much pride in myself to let myself go like that. And I'd go to these Hall of Fame events, and all the my colleagues stayed in shape because they still had gyms and still had karate schools and boxing gyms, and they would make fat jokes about me. Oh, here comes Casper. He's still coming. He's still coming. He's coming to the door, and they would tell me, man, you're looking bad, dude. You need to get into shape. I'm like, yeah, I know, I know, I know. And there was all that was kind of hitting at the same time, so I was kind of like, you know what, I'm done. I can't let myself do this. So I started training my butt off again. First, I changed my mindset. My mindset is I don't care what I've got going in my life. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. and get in the gym and start my workouts at 4:30 a.m. And it wasn't that I had to do that. It's to change my mindset. It's like Lombardi said, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. It's a mindset. It's a way of life. It's a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. And I had to change my mindset from the losing habits to the winning habits. And the 4 a.m. sounds extreme, but it was a mindset change that put me over the top. When you fight that battle of getting up when your alarm goes off at 4 a.m. and that you're starting your first weight workout at 4:30, when you go to work afterwards, you're sore and you don't cheat on your diet because you have to have a pretty strict diet. You have to do it all: diet, exercise. You got to be all in. It's easy to stay faithful to your diet when you're sore from your workout, when you're walking around, and you remember you got up when your dang alarm went off at 4 a.m. You fought that battle and you won. Anyway, when I started I was off for like 7 months. I was retired. I wasn't going back to law enforcement, and I had an investigator at Ponder PD where I used to work with the sheriff's office. Taught me to come out of retirement and come into work in a town that I grew up in, where I'm at now, to be a police chief. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll do it for a year. I'll get all your stuff squared away, your administrative stuff, your legal stuff, and then I'm out. I'll get y'all fixed up. Hire you a new chief. I'll get out. As I started, I realized that burnout was gone, and that burnout, the thing that was different than when I left was training 5 days a week and losing lots of weight. I mean, I say lose weight. I went from I'm floating around 270 now, which is 100 pounds lighter than I was, but I toned up really good at about 260. But I didn't. It took about a year and a half to do that because I was not. It wasn't so much as losing weight as it was changing fat percentage. Your lean muscle mass versus fat.
Mhm.
And I went into fitting all of my old clothes again, having a pep in my step again. It changed everything. And I went back. And I'm not taking on fights anymore. And I don't really have the desire to fight any expedition fights like I used to because all my colleagues that stay in the ring too long now are starting to get slurred speech and stuff like that. And I don't want to be one of those guys. But training other fighters. I take on a couple of pros a year, and I clean up their techniques and their angles and combinations and get them from a mediocre level to a champion level. And you have to be in shape to train them, and then you still have to spar with them. You still have to do other things with them. You have to be able to show them that you can still do what you're training them to do to teach them correctly, and that keeps me accountable to staying in shape, even though before I had a reason because of fights. Well, that blooming thing the doctor told me back then that, you're being pre-diabetic, diabetic. And I got to where I was on a lot of blood pressure medicines. I was on a statin for cholesterol. I was on a diet, metformin, all this other stuff. I'm hardly having to take any of that stuff now because I'm in shape and I'm training. And so when I started here, I didn't have the burnout stress that I had before. And the big precipitating factor is I physically got back into shape and got back into the mindset I was before, and that changed everything. Also, taking the time off, my wife told me that I was a person that she recognized again because I wasn't irritable or angry all the time, um, from all the stress I went through in the job from that burnout. And mine was late. And I think if I had some mechanism in place that would have had me continue to train, I probably wouldn't have gone through that burnout like I did. I think that, and I was to say that's one of many precipitating factors. Uh, some of the admin where I worked at got kind of toxic at the time, but I look back and if I was in shape, I've been through those toxic environments before. I could handle it when I was in shape. My mental health could survive it. My physical health was there. Your physical health is sort of that. It seems like they all come together. Your mental health, your physical health, and your spiritual health. If one of those falls, they all fall with it. Like a house of cards. And that was my burnout experience. But from all of that, I was the guy that would coach and mentor people up, try to keep them from going through burnout. And moving forward as the chief here, I don't want to. And we're a small department, and we're going to get big really fast. This whole area is growing. The one thing I'm going to do schedule wise and is make sure that I'm not one of those administrators that's putting a schedule on my guys like they're robots.
Mm.
That they want to stay and train and they want to have a normal life outside of work. And that's do everything I can from the things. It's like when you want to be a supervisor, you say, if I ever become a supervisor, I'm not going to be like that guy. So I got to go out of my way to say, if I was ever going to be chief, I want to be that guy. So I got to make sure I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
And from that, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot of keeping my guys from burning out. I learned a lot of wonderful things then. Also, from being an athlete and being a leader, a natural leader. I say a natural leader. I think a lot of it had to do with being an athlete. I go back to the Lombardi philosophy of being a leader. And there's a book out there. I would say anybody that is a sergeant or higher should probably read the book. It's called the Lombardi Power Sweep. It's from the 60s and 70s. And it's a leadership program. He would teach this. He'd travel. He'd do teach seminars or talk at these seminars and conferences where he would talk for hours on the power sweep. One play that if you did it perfectly, no one could defend it because of how you coached your people up. But he was teaching all these Fortune 500 companies because it wasn't about a football game. It wasn't about a football play. It was about leadership and creating excellent and exceptional individuals to have an exceptional, excellent team. To have an excellent team, you got to have excellent individuals. You got to understand that everybody in that team and everybody running that play is the most important player on the team. And you get people holding themselves accountable to excellence and hold each other accountable to excellence in a competitive arena to where it's fun and where everybody wants to fight hard for you and everybody wants to do well. And that is how I was as a supervisor at the bigger agencies. I wasn't a supervisor as much as I was a coach. I've had a couple of supervisors that said, well, you're just being your friend and that make him a good supervisor. It's like, no, no, no. It doesn't have anything to do with a friend. It has to do with making champion individuals and making a champion team.
Mm.
And we get a lot of these supervisor training now. They try to teach you just to be a good supervisor, give you a participation trophy to call yourself a leader. It doesn't work that way. And I, in the supervisor training, they need to be more. They say they're teaching you how to be a good leader, but all they're doing is the typical cookie cutter manager versus manager supervisor versus leader. And you have to be a leader. You have to have people want to perform for you. You got to have people want to give all they have and give 110% for you. And you got to be committed to when these people leave you, they are they are better than they were when they came to you. And that's part of the leadership role. So as chief coming in, having the experience of being able to practice, implement this on a working application level and hitting the burnout myself and seeing it over 30-something year career, uh, you you get an understanding of what you want to change as a police chief. And one is mental health. You got to have your mental health there. Um, these guys have got to be able to when they ask for help, that they get help, and that after that the administration is out of it. It's up between him and the counselor or the clinician he's talking to. Because I've also seen through my career, if someone reached out for that help, um, that their career was over. Their career was over. You know, they say, if you need help, ask for help. No, not in this life. In this career, your career is over. Or they'll reassign you to something like back in the jail or working some desk job that you don't want to work, and then you're there stuck. And as long as their attitude is, well, as long as you work for us, it's the one job we have for you because of this thing. And they use the fit for duty. Well, how do we know you're fit for duty because of this thing? And that's the biggest killer. I mean, that's why a lot of officers over the years just don't reach out because you don't have to touch electric fence a lot of times to know what the outcome is, right? Um, in the last decade, they've been forced, administrations have been forced to change this, especially in Texas. Texas, like I said, right to work state. Uh, if you're not civil service, you can be let go at any time. Um, I don't know if I say because I've only been a law enforcement officer in Texas most of my career. I had a lot of, I got to travel around and teach defense tactics to other agencies and other states and stuff. And it seems like a cop is a cop is a cop wherever you go. But this is something that's the pendulum is slowly turning to where it's not a stigma, and officers can know that they can reach out and have that mental health avenue in place without being a career-ending thing or being permanently assigned someplace that they didn't sign on to be, and they're not happy. People don't get in law enforcement because they want to be happy or because for money. They get into it because they love the job. And if you take the thing that they love, because we certainly don't get paid, that good, and then they don't want to do it anymore. And that adds stress also. And it takes away initiative and motive and all that other stuff and importance and everything they got into it to do are accomplished. Now it's like when I came here, we switched to Lexipol for our policies and procedures. And Lexipol is very good about pushing out the best practices and best updates for legislatively and litigation and the mental health aspect of it. They've been, when you look at their policies, are very good. And so a lot of your policy people like Lexipol and other people that are agencies are using for policy procedures are implementing this as well and have it in your policy procedures. It gives you a lot of, it helps officers moving forward. Whereas before this wasn't in there. And when you would, I mean, I don't know if it was taboo, I guess. And you would have people that would come back from doing 2 or 3 tours in Iraq, and then they would get into doing the stuff in the job, and they would take them back to that place they were when they were overseas, and they would start having mental health problems. They start losing their marriages, they start drinking, they would start having sleep problems, and they'd reach out, hey, do we have anybody on insurance? I need help. I need, I'm having this, I'm having that. And they'd be honest about it because they think they're doing the right thing. Career over. Or they get reassigned, or if they're in a middle sized or small agency, it's like, well, you know, they're gone. They're no longer working there. And that's the one um, that's the one hard truth that no one talks about because 800-pound gorilla in the room. Well, you got to fix something. You've got to cut out the cancer first, and you've got to deal with the 100-pound gorilla in the room and make sure it's not there before you can move forward. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
And things like this and what you're doing, when I watch some of your YouTube videos, it's very helpful. It's bringing it to the forefront and it's making it not such a taboo subject. But you can only beat certain administrations over the head for so long. But the because of this becoming to the forefront and being aware, they're forced to. They don't have a choice. Whether you like it or not, this is the direction we're going. This is what you're going to do.
Mm.
And they're starting to recognize the job and what it does to officers and how taxing it is on them. And like I said, the general public is pushing this, and it's now, when the general public, it's like, hey, we got to fix this, and when it gets more into the political part, then it gets forced into the filters down into the administrations. But before, it wasn't a thing, and it was taboo to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, sharing your personal experiences with this and talking about how you were able to overcome it, how you were able to change your mindset. I do agree with you that it's all intertwined and physical health impacts mental health. And if you have, found yourself in a position, which I've have before too, where you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to make a positive change or else. And
Mhm.
it's a smart strategy to start with the physical because it snowballs from there. And one of the things that you said earlier was, you know, the more hard things you can do, then the more hard things you can do. So it creates more resilience over time, right? And the more you're able to withstand, and that was kind of what popped in my head as you're talking is like the resilience, you're able to absorb and like have those things kind of bounce off you a little bit more because you understand that you're able to train and you're able to overcome some of these adversities and these stressors. My question for you, my final question for you, is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with the younger men and women who are entering into this career today? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Number one, before they get into it, they need to understand the statistics of the 75% at 30 is going to be out of it. They can't handle it. Your longevity, your lifespan in this job because of what it physically and mentally does to you and emotionally, you're not going to live that long. Stress is bad. Uh, physical health, mental health, spiritual health. The spiritual is everything too. I mean, you're dealing with some of the most horrific, tragic things in the world. And if you're not spiritually grounded, it's going to eat you up and spit you out. And physical health, back to something you said, resiliency. God kind of made us that way, that the resiliency in trials and tribulations makes us stronger. You look at the sea turtle, I'll give you an analogy that I heard that makes sense. They have these animal rights group that thought that they were going to make more sea turtles live longer by getting the little hatchlings. And instead of them have to do that big life and death struggle they have to do to get off the beach, to get into the water to where they can live, they thought they could just scoop them all up and run them into the water and then they'd be safe. Well, when they got to the water, they all drowned because they didn't build up the strength to be able to swim and survive the right waves because the resiliency of fighting that life and death battle to get to the ocean made them when they got there, they had the strength and resiliency to not only swim, but swim in the current of waves. And that's kind of how we are. If you're training and you're in shape, what do you do when you train? What do you do when you run a marathon? I mean, when you're training, lifting weights, you're breaking down and tearing down your muscles so they'll grow bigger. You're stretching your lungs and burning yourself out and using all the electrolytes on your muscles and tearing your body down so it'll grow back stronger and stronger. So like you said, the key word, the more you do, the more you know you can do, and that's how we learn life. I mean, I've learned more through failures and pain. My dad used to always say pain is self-correcting. It really is. I've learned more from pain and mistakes, painful mistakes, that's made me grow stronger and better and propelled me exponentially further than successes. And
Yeah.
I failed more and fell off the wagon more, I guess, from successes than from failures, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And so physically, you got to stay physically fit, even when you're in the place where you've got a bunch of number crunchers that wants boots on the ground and don't care about your schedule, your sleep, your life, your personal life. If you got a place like that in law enforcement now, you can actually move to another department without being blackballed and told that you'll never work in it again, or getting go to a department that has the schedule and a place where you'll be happy, in a place where you can be healthy and make good money and you don't have to work a lot of off-duty jobs to support your family. So that's another one. You want to work at a big agency where you get a lot of experience. Once you get all that experience, then go for the money and the happiness, because staying in it and having this martyr mentality that you're going to stay in a bad place because you think you can change it, it's just going to kill you. Uh, do not, do not let the job be your identity. That's the biggest thing that most people get into. All their friends and everybody they run around with is a cop. Everything they do is a cop. They can't turn that crap off and not talk about anything else when you're running around with them. Somebody warned me about that when I was young, and when I was at, like, department parties and get-togethers, I got to where there's these people that can't turn the job off. They're so into the job. That's all they talk about. That it takes over their whole identity. These people I talk about, they get completely burned out. They let the job take their identity. They're no longer the person they were. They're no longer Bob or Joe or Ann or whoever they were before they came there. And in the process of doing that, they lose their hobbies, the things they like doing. They lose relationships. You've got to be able to turn that off. When you're running around with friends and your friends of circles and you get law enforcement, make sure that very few of them are cops. You don't want to run with a cop. You don't want to be a cop when you're off duty. You got to learn how to leave that at the edge of your property and not drag it into your front door at home when you come at home. You got to leave the job away from your home. You've got to be able to effectively turn that off when you go home. And when you're running around with your friends, your spouses, your relatives, not talk about it. Even when anybody wants to hear some war story or tell some questions, I always turn that off. Hey, I don't, what do you do for a living? A plumber? Why? You want to tell me some plumber war stories? They're like, no, not really. I'm not at work. It's like that same thing. Um, you've got to have that mindset. You've got to be able to do it. I mean, they're so excited and so into what they're doing. It's all they can talk about. It's because they're so in love with what they do. But in the process of doing that, they don't set any healthy borders or boundaries with that job as it pertains to their personal life, and it becomes their whole identity. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's the worst thing you can do. That is the number one killer. Not being able to physically train and giving away their identity for the job to where they're never off work. Even when they're hanging out with a friend, what are they doing? They're talking about work. They're hanging around other cops. They're not in. You got to be, and that was another thing I think that really helped me a lot over going so long without the burnout. Because when I'm running around, going to football games, hanging out, backyard get-togethers, whatever else, my circle, very few of the people in my hunting, fishing, and hanging out circle were actually cops.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to hear him talk about work. You know what I mean? I wanted to be able to get completely escape from what I'm doing. Another one's hobbies. I'm very fortunate. I have a family place in St. Joe, Texas, in a beautiful place. It's out in the middle of nowhere. We hunt and fish, and it's a property our family's had most of my law enforcement career. And I can go down in the middle of nowhere, build a big, beautiful nighttime campfire, let the coyotes sing to me. I don't have good cell phone service. I don't have to, I can be away from people. I don't have to even carry on a conversation with anybody. And it allows me to de-stress and to separate myself from what I do and kind of refocus and recenter myself. So, in the gym, doing my thing as you're working out and fighting that war yourself, it kind of centers yourself, reminds you of who you are, where you're going, and where you came from. And the same thing when you get whatever your hobby is. My hobby is anything outdoors, anything where I get to hear animals, see the big, beautiful Texas sky, see a beautiful nighttime campfire, all these things that I enjoy, see lots of animals running around while I'm drinking coffee, whatever. These are things that I enjoy, and these are things that that completely distract me from what I do for a living. I don't even have to think about it. And then I'd even have guys from work that I would take down there to try to teach them, hey, you need to do stuff like this away from work so you don't bring work home with you. But anyway, I'm getting off my rabbit trail here. That's very important. And some people are into mountain climbing. If you're into fishing, if you're into knitting, if you're into croquet, tennis, don't lose your hobbies because when you start getting so into your job that you lose your hobbies, it's like you get this depression. And the reason why you get this depression and not know you're getting it, one, is because you're overstressed, and two, all the things that you loved, you've thrown away. They're not there anymore. And those were your outlets before you got into this job that made you happy and reminded you that life is good. And when you throw all that away, what do you have? So
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. And that's what I could talk on hours about the job stealing your identity because you let it. You've got to have those healthy borders. So don't let the job steal your identity. Make sure that your big circle of friends and acquaintances when you're away from work aren't cops. And so you can leave work at work.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your words of wisdom and your insights and your experiences. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. I like what you're doing because this is the
Thank
kind
you.
of thing that's forced law enforcement agencies in the last decade to actually take the mental health seriously on officers and to take away the stigma and, hey, you reached out for help, your career is over, or we're going to assign you to something that will never be in patrol or never be out in the public or anything that you love doing, it takes that stigma away. And until we take that stigma away and the way it used to be, that big 800-pound gorilla in the room, that a lot of people in this line of work are going to be fearful when they've seen it with their own two eyes to do this. And platforms like this bring it to the forefront, and it which forces politicians and administrations to have to do this with their people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. It
You're
means a
welcome.
lot. I appreciate it. We'll definitely stay in touch.
Sure. You have a great holidays.
Thank you. You too.